Welcome back to the BlackTrack, where I do commentary and review on movies with an all-black cast, or at least a black lead. If you're about as old as me and grew up in the 90s, then you would know that Terry McMillian books had black women in America in a chokehold back then. And since those were basically the only type of books in my house to read back then, that pretty much meant I was getting choked out pretty regularly also as a result. I was one of those kids that would read pretty much anything, so when I read Waiting to Exhale for the first time, I was unaware of the pro-black woman, anti-black man message and agenda that Terry McMillian has been accused of promoting all throughout the 90s. I just wanted to read good stories, but reading these same books as an adult, I can kind of see where a lot of men were coming from back then. I even briefly touched on the black public perception of Terry McMillian back when I BlackTracked the movie Drop Squad. The author character they tried to rehabilitate was very obviously loosely based on McMillian. Out of all her books though, somehow I skipped right over her second book in today's movie, Disappearing Acts. For this BlackTrack, I made sure to rectify that by not only watching the movie that the book is based on, released in the year 2000, but also going back and reading the book, which was released all the way back in 1989. I'm experiencing both for the first time, and for the first time on the BlackTrack, I wanted to not just talk about the movie, but also compare the movie and the book to see the differences and which one handles the story better. No matter whether you read the book or watched the movie, the setup is the same. Disappearing Acts stars Sanaya Lathan as Zora Banks, a college-educated single black woman who meets and falls in love with Mr. Franklin Swift, played by the triple threat Wesley Snipes. Wesley even has a producer credit through his company Amin Ra Films. It's directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, who might not be a huge name among black directors, but you know who she is. She directed the cult favorite movie Love and Basketball, and more recently, The Woman King. We all know that it's usually a guarantee that the book is better than the movie, but is that necessarily the case with a movie like Disappearing Acts that was released so much later than the book that it was based on? Let's BlackTrack and find out. The movie begins with an Angie Stone song playing in the background, as Zora rides through what we can easily guess is New York. There's even a shot of the towers, since this was probably filmed in late 99 or early 2000. Movies in the 90s and early 2000s did a great job with these little montages showing off black life in major cities, although I think out of all of them, Love Jones did it the best. Like most book-to-movie adaptations, they have to condense a lot of story into a short movie, and Disappearing Acts is no exception. In the movie, Zora shows up to her new place and is informed by Franklin that it will take a minute for the floors to be ready. It happens about the same in the book, but she actually shows up a whole 3 weeks earlier than this, and she's informed that the place won't be ready for another 3 weeks. But once she comes back on move-in day, it happens almost exactly the way it does in the movie. I get why they removed it, because it is a little redundant. What I don't get is why they felt the need to remove Zora's gay friend Eli, who helps her set up her place and plays an important part in later parts of the book. In fact, in the movie, all of the homosexual characters are either changed or removed completely, which comes across as kinda weird when you consider the author's history. For those unaware, the short version is that Terry McMillian met and married a man she met on an island vacation named Jonathan Plummer in 1998. And as soon as he got to the United States and got good and comfortable, he came out as gay. If it sounds familiar, it's because it became the inspiration for how Stella got her groove back. I had to check the dates for when Disappearing Acts was written and his reveal, because Disappearing Acts the book uses a ton of derogatory gay terms, as if the author was justifiably angry. But Disappearing Acts was written in 1989, over 10 years before his reveal, so who knows? I only say all that to add context as to why maybe all the gay characters that were originally a part of the book are now mysteriously missing in the movie. One thing the book has that I wish the movie also had was the internal monologue. No, not narration, it's a difference. Internal monologues are just the characters discussing internally how they're feeling at that very moment, like an inner thought. It's a good way to get some quick and easy character development out there, and I actually think the movie had enough time to do it. The book jumps back and forth from the perspective of both Franklin and Zora, and in the beginning, there's entire chapters dedicated to what kind of people they are and what kind of qualities they're looking for in a mate. There is a small line in the movie where Zora's type is described, but it comes after their first meeting, so their initial attraction to each other feels purely physical and as a result, forced. Though to be fair to the movie, a big part of Zora's attraction to Franklin is the fact that he's tall, dark, and muscular, and a big part of Franklin's attraction to Zora is the fact that she has a big ass. Two things that don't have to be said to be understood. Their occupations aren't changed at all in the movie also, with Zora being a music teacher at a school and an aspiring singer, and Franklin being a freelance construction worker. A big part of Franklin's story is the fact that he can't really hold down consistent work, always getting laid off or outright denied work because of the fact that he's black and uneducated. Movie Disappearing Acts keeps this reality but downplays the uglier parts of Franklin's history. In the movie, Franklin just doesn't have his GED, which he actually does have in the book, but the movie omits the fact that he was a drug addict, spent time in jail, and was discharged from the Navy because of his temper. Well, damn, that might have been nice to know. One thing that stood out to me in the book is that Terry McMillian does not know how to write convincing male characters. The whole time I'm reading it, I'm thinking, this guy is the worst kind of stereotype, calling his penis Tarzan, and all kinds of other corny nonsense. I kept thinking to myself, no man talks like this, 1980s or otherwise. Of course, Zora has a much prettier history. In both mediums, she's college educated, talented, and has a good job. She's pretty flawless to be honest, which isn't helping Terry McMillian beat those allegations. In fact, it appears like the only flaw she really has is dark-skinned men, which hey, you won't catch me being mad at that. Even amongst her friends, she's the most rational one. She has two very different homegirls with very different motivations in life. One of them is Portia, played by the lovely Regina Hall. She could be described as a bit of a gold digger, always chasing the bag, and not being afraid to offer some goodies of her own if the situation calls for it. Claudette, played by Lisa Arundel from Living Large, is the complete opposite. She's a lawyer who's married to an investment banker, and her and Portia don't get along at all, because Portia thinks Claudette is stuck up and snobby, and Claudette thinks Portia is somewhat of a whore. The two friends aren't changed at all from the book, but removed from the movie is a third friend named Marie, who actually ends up being way more interesting than the other two in the book, but we'll get to that part later. On the other end, Franklin also has a homie named Jimmy, supposedly a big fat guy in the book, but a guy who looks like Franklin's dad in the movie. He's a drug dealer in the book, who always borrows money from Franklin, which makes him the world's worst drug dealer, by the way. In the movie, he doesn't appear to be a drug dealer at all, and it appears they combined another friend from the book named Lucky into just one Jimmy in the movie. The guy Lucky in the book had a gambling problem, just like movie Jimmy. So we got a former junkie high school dropout and a guy with a gambling problem who just might be the world's worst drug dealer. The men in this movie are off to a hell of a start. Yo, I wish I had the kind of intuition and audacity that Franklin has for a girl he just met. He goes right for Zora. All gas, no brakes. He just knows that Zora wants to meet. Don't look for it in that fridge, baby. It's right here. If it feels a little fast and unrealistic that they jump straight into the sex like this, don't worry. It happens just like this in the book. The movie really doesn't have a lot of time for all this sweet stuff though. It's gotta get to the toxicity in a hurry. And you know the best way to get past the honeymoon phase fast in a movie? That's right, you guessed it, a musical montage. Look at him all happy to show her off. He know he got him a baddie. We also get a scene with the couple playing Scrabble, something that's a big deal in the book, so it's nice to see it incorporated here. I also might have forgotten to mention this before, but book Disappearing Acts takes place in the 80s, like 1981 to 1983. But movie Disappearing Acts is modern day. Well, year 2000 modern day. The movie does a way better job of putting you in the time period than the book does. Aside from a few mentions of movie titles and public figures, the book never made me feel like it was the early 80s while reading it. I just realized that by saying that, Disappearing Acts the book could easily be the story of how my parents met, which is kind of weird to think about, and also, ugh. Remember earlier when I was telling you how the movie got rid of all the gay? Well, the character Reginald Baptiste is one of those casualties. In the book, Reggie is a vocal coach who's trying to improve Zora's singing skills and maybe connect her with some music executives. She's introduced to him through her friend Eli, and it's heavily implied that they have a sexual relationship. In the movie, Reginald is just a plain old producer, played by Q-Tip, but interestingly, both versions of the character are equally sassy. Both Q-Tip Reggie and Book Reggie are super aggressive with Zora, but at least book Reggie is teaching some useful skills. Movie Reggie feels like he just wants to exploit Zora for money, on some Diddy type shit. Although it's very convincing, Sanaa Lathan isn't actually singing in the film, to the surprise of no one, I'm sure. The actual singer is Melky John, the younger sister of rapper, producer, and member of the Fugees, Wyclef Jean. My guy Franklin sure knows how to play his cards close to the chest. Maybe they should have made his character a gambler. He waits until they're good and deep in their relationship to drop the hammer down. He reveals to Zora that not only is he a high school dropout, but he's also married. And not only is he still married, but he also has 2 kids. Like I said earlier, all of this is the same from the book, except the GED thing. All things considered, I think Zora takes it pretty well, which confuses me a little bit. It's not like Zora can't find a better man. It feels like she just doesn't want a better man. Like, I get it that he's her type, but I just think there's a thin line between desire and desperation. Franklin, I think, is just the type of dude who makes excuses for everything. It's always somebody else's fault, and that's his character flaw. The movie does him a disservice, however, because there's no time to give background on his relationship with his mother and how it affected his upbringing and the person he became. It's very important to his development, and without it, he just appears sorry as hell for no reason. The movie also changes the names of the kids, which feels unnecessary. One of the kids has my son's name. What are they trying to say? My son got an old 80s name? Perhaps if the movie put some effort into the mother-son dynamic with Franklin, we might have gotten a better movie because it leaves off some hard-hitting stuff. Zora has a seizure one night, and she explains to Franklin that she used to get them a lot when she was younger, but that they had become less frequent. There's way more to it in the book though. There, Franklin and Zora go to Franklin's parents' house for Thanksgiving. Zora ends up drinking alcohol because she's nervous, something she never does because she believes it could trigger her seizures. It causes her to become more vocal at the dinner table, and she says something that upsets Franklin's mother, who then throws mashed potatoes in Zora's face. Could you imagine that scene in the movie? That scene alone would have elevated this movie beyond what the finished product became. We also would have gotten more scenes with CCH Pounder, who plays Franklin's mother, and John Amos, who plays his father. In its place, the movie version does a very short and inconsequential scene where Franklin and Zora still go to Franklin's parents' house for Thanksgiving, but none of the conflict in the book happens. Yeah, Franklin's mom gives Zora the cold shoulder and craps all over Franklin's ambitions, but it's not nearly enough to make an impact. We get glimpses of some of the book stuff, like Mr. Franklin being too weak to check his wife on her behavior, but the movie decides the family stuff just isn't important. Needless to say, I heavily disagree. There's even a book subplot where one of Franklin's 2 sisters goes through a depression and tries to end herself, which doesn't really end up meaning much in the book, but I would have preferred that subplot to how much time the movie dedicates to the Reggie producer stuff and the stuff with Franklin at his various jobs. But then I have to remind myself that this was a low-budget, made-for-TV HBO production, and there was only so many scenes and characters that they could have put in it. Having Wesley Snipes in this alone probably killed half the budget. So after saying all that, the reason Zora had a seizure in the book was because of the alcohol she had at the Thanksgiving dinner, and because she was stressed out, which makes more sense than the random occurrence that happens in the movie. Oh Lord, what's going on with you, Zora? Oh no, I know it ain't what I think it is. Oh, it's definitely bad, because in the very next scene, they turn the saturation down and turn the blue tint on. Movies only ever do that when it's bad stuff. Sure enough, Zora is pregnant, and this is one of the few scenes where I feel like the movie does things better. In the book, Zora gets pregnant twice by Franklin, but decides to have an abortion the first time without telling Franklin. Of course he finds out because he's nosy as hell and low-key sex obsessed. So when she gets pregnant the second time, he begs her to keep it. The movie saves time by just having Zora get pregnant one time and having Franklin beg her to keep it immediately. It's a time saver that I'm not particularly offended by, especially since if they kept everything the same, this would have been Zora's 3rd abortion. Something that probably would have killed the sympathy for movie Zora dead on the spot in some people's eyes. Hey, now that you got a baby on the way, it's a good thing you found some steady union work, right, Frankie?
You driving me crazy.
Ouch. This is another aspect of the story that I'm glad the movie condenses, because there's a lot more that leads up to this in the book. Like Franklin partnering up with a pro-black employment group called A Dream Deferred, who help minorities get work where they otherwise would be discriminated against. but later finding out that the group is corrupt and also takes payoffs to keep them out of certain jobs. In either version, Franklin drinking on the job and having an accident is what keeps him out of work and on the couch long term. So all roads lead to the same place. If there's anybody in the movie who has the best glow up, makeover, redemption, whatever you want to call it, it's Franklin's wife and baby mom's Pam, because in the book, she has absolutely no redeeming qualities. Book Pam is described as ghetto, lazy, loud, money hungry, and nearly over 350 pounds. The nicest thing the book can bother to say about her is that she takes care of the kids, I guess, and she befriends Zora when the new baby finally comes. Oh yeah, they had a boy, by the way. Book Pam sounds more like Monique in the movie Precious. Movie Pam only gets one scene, but thankfully, she's the complete opposite of Book Pam. She's confident, calm, and collected, and is just a single mother doing her best and trying to make Franklin step up. She's played by Anjanou Ellis, who's decidedly not 350 pounds, and also not West Indian like Book Pam, even though the movie kinda humorously makes one of her kids have an accent, even though Pam doesn't. While I'm on the topic of big changes, the movie also removes a moment that honestly didn't need to be in it, but also goes back to the suspicious mandate to remove all LGBT elements from the story. So earlier, I was telling you that the book had a third friend in Zora's group named Marie, who's a comedian. One night, Marie asked Zora to come to her apartment and loan her some money because she's about to be evicted. When Zora arrives, Marie is drunk and forgets that Zora isn't a lesbian and reveals that she always wanted her and proceeds to grab Zora's breasts. Up until this point, Zora didn't know that Marie was a lesbian, and of course, flabbergasted by the whole ordeal, knocks Marie to the ground and agrees to still be her friend as long as they never speak about this again. Yeah, it's an interesting little detour that I can picture in my head, but it doesn't really have a place in the movie, so it's likely why the entire character was removed altogether. At this point, Franklin goes full villain mode, drinking all the time, sitting around the house watching Love Connection in the book, and I guess Judge Mathis in the movie. At least that's what I would have been watching in the year 2000. He even ruins Zora's birthday by causing a scene when she buys closer tickets to see Shaka Khan than the ones Franklin bought, which, if we can rewind on that for a second, is kinda messed up. Cause I mean, you know this man's stop hasn't come up yet on the struggle bus. Why waste that money if he already bought the tickets? In the book, it was Franklin ruining a trip to the movies and getting pissy drunk at dinner. Also around this time in the book, they take a disastrous trip out of town, which ends with Franklin putting hands on Zora. Perhaps the worst thing he does is forget to pick up their son from the babysitter, which ends up essentially being the line for Zora. Well, that and losing the rights to the song she did with Reggie because of lack of effort and money. Oh yeah, and there's the matter of the assault that Franklin does after an argument one night. I mean, but other than that, things aren't that bad, right? Right? When he learns he has to leave or else, Franklin loses it and destroys the house. Correction, he destroys all the things he made in the house because his hobby is woodworking. I think I forgot to mention that. We get one more montage showing what Zora and Franklin have been up to since the breakup, with Franklin getting his GED and Zora taking care of baby Jeremiah, occasionally seeing Franklin by chance and running away like somebody pit got loose. A few months down the line, Franklin comes by. He hasn't seen his son the entire time, but he did send some checks. He wanted to come by and tell her all the good news about getting his GED, finally getting divorced, and getting his contractor license. No word on them AA meetings though, he ain't giving that up. And just when you thought it was no hope to rekindle things, Zora brings up the one thing that always brought them together.
I never beat you at Scrabble.
The book ends pretty much the same way, except they have sex instead of Scrabble. I mean, it has been a while, wouldn't you? But wait a minute, I just realized that the movie never mentioned or showed where Franklin lived. Probably because it's supposed to be a rooming house that's like right down the street from Zora's place, and there's no way they could have avoided each other all this time. Let's get to the grade. As the old saying goes, the book is always better than the movie, but in this case, not by much. Disappearing Acts the book is of course way more detailed and breaks down all the intricacies of all the characters' thought process and motivations. It also better places you in the shoes of Zora and Franklin, since the story is told first person from the perspective of both characters, rather than the third-party observer we become for the movie. However, compared to McMillian's other books, it's one of the weakest. I get that it's trying to be a realistic portrayal of a toxic relationship, but like I said earlier, it's hard to balance the believability and avoid crossing over to the absurd and taking the reader out of the story, which I think the book does, unfortunately. You can have dumb and naive characters without making them do dumb and naive and unrealistic stuff, if that makes sense. The characters can insult each other and themselves, but should never insult the intelligence of the audience, so to speak. The book feels like it exists only to make the audience go, "Girl, I would never," and for nothing else. Basically shock value. The movie, on the other hand, feels like it was afraid to go anywhere near any of the controversy of the book, playing it extremely safe and by the book, pardon the pun. It removes all of the controversial characters, it takes away majority of the tense moments that would elicit some kind of emotion, and worst of all, it takes away all of the characterization, instead going for the generic character tropes usually associated with Black love story movies. There's nothing to make it stand out from the better love stories other than the fact that it can barely be considered a love story at all. It's more like a life story, or a cautionary tale about falling in love with the wrong person. I'm sure the budget prevented a lot of what it could have been, and I'm almost certain that's why it doesn't take place in the 80s. Period pieces cost money, but keeping in mind it was made for HBO, you got to look at it like a movie you stumble on while switching channels one day and go, damn, that's Annihilation and Wesley Snipes. What kind of movie is this? 25 years later, the draw of the movie now is the star power and not the name. Even if you've never read the book, a movie should still be entertaining, and whether Disappearing Acts is to you or not depends solely on how well you identify with the story. As for me though, my grade for Disappearing Acts is a D+. Just for the hell of it, my grade for the book is a C. Neither one are classics in my opinion, and even though the book just barely edges out the movie, Terry McMillian has greater offerings in her library. And that's it for another episode of the BlackTrack. Let me know how you feel about these book to movie adaptation BlackTracks. And also, let me know how you feel about the movie Disappearing Acts in the comments below. As usual, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell your friends about my channel. And until next time, I'll holla at you.